Hello, citizens of Lynchburg, and welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about the Firehouse primary and what happened to it. Was it rigged to fail? Let's get into it. Okay, so remember, a Firehouse primary is a party-run primary. It's just a way to um, narrow down the field to nominate candidates. In this case, they were candidates for city council. There's 3 at-large seats open. There'll be an election in November. The Firehouse primary was to narrow down the fields. So out of the 10 Republican candidates running, 3 would be selected. Whoa, that was my cat. So let's look at the top picture. That gentleman is Chairman Ryer, Jeff Ryer. He is the head of the Republican Party of Virginia. So he is at the top of the bureaucracy, the elite bureaucracy that rules the mechanism of the Republican Party in Virginia. He came to Lynchburg multiple times. He was intimately involved with the planning of the Firehouse primary. He gave the green light on everything from the process to the tabulation. Every step of the process was approved and according to the party plan. Now, the picture of people raising their hands was at a meeting of the LRCC. And in February, Reed, Taylor, and Boswell had declared that they were running. And immediately after that, Reed went on social media, Andre Whitehead and WLNI and News in Advance, and her own web Facebook page stating that the Firehouse primary was rigged. It was rigged against her and basically defaming the Firehouse primary and hence the Republican Party. And she was also urging Democrats to vote. So at that meeting of the LRCC, the Lynchburg Republican City Committee, a vote was taken to take a look at her record. There had been for years grave concern over her voting record and her behavior on the dais. And as our videos have shown, she doesn't work for the citizens. She works for the city manager, Mr. Winter Benda. So a vote was taken to examine her record. But before the vote could be taken, the Republican delegate, Wendell Walker of the 52nd District, jumped up yelling to adjourn the meeting. He did not want a vote taken. He did not want Reed's record to be looked at. Why? He's always been a strong supporter of Reed, despite the fact that the Republican citizens of Lynchburg do not appreciate her voting record or her behavior. But that hasn't seemed to get into his head. He hasn't seemed to grasp that they don't feel that she is acting on their best behalf. The next picture is of the Firehouse primary on May 30th, and it was an amazing success. 1,633 people attended it, and they voted, and their votes were tabulated, and 3 winners were selected. The citizens elected Veronica Bratton, Marty Mischins, and Larry Taylor. And remember, there were 10 people running, and 3 of them were on one team, 3 on another, and then there were 4 candidates running independently. And Taylor was on the ticket with Reed and Boswell, but he won the nominations with Bratton and Mischins. So those 3 won. And immediately after the tabulation was finished, Chairman Ryer was there for the day at the primary, and he told the chairwoman of the Lynchburg unit, the Republican Party, he told her, do not certify these results. Now, that's very puzzling. Why would you not certify the results of an election? And he called her multiple times on Sunday, and he called her on Monday, but she did go ahead and certify the results with the registrar and the State Board of Elections so that they cannot be thrown out unless there's a court order. Now, by Tuesday morning, appeals had come in from Reed and Boswell, from Christopher Aldi, and from 2 citizens. And these appeals were eventually consolidated into one document. There was too much overlap, and they didn't have enough signatures. And this one appeals document was a request to throw out the Firehouse primary. So that was sent to the Republican Party of Virginia to Chairman Ryer. And Chairman Ryer formed an appeals committee of 5 members, 2 of them selected by Reed et al., 2 of them selected by the local Republican Lynchburg unit, and 1 by the RPV. So that 5-member appeals committee came up with a decision. The majority decision was to throw out the Firehouse. So 3 people drew up a document to throw out the firehouse based on these reasons. And then two people dissented and they said, no, it should not be thrown out because there wasn't any evidence of any fraudulent activity or any votes being changed or manipulated. So then the Lynchburg Republican City Committee compiled a rebuttal of over 200 pages stating that there's no evidence that any wrongdoing was done. It was a fair and valid election, and please do not throw it out. So after the appeals committee had made their decision, that was sent. The majority opinion to throw it out and the minority opinion were all sent to the state central committee, the SCC. And they had a meeting already scheduled for June 13th, barely 2 weeks after the Firehouse primary. And at that meeting, they were going to decide whether or not to throw out the Lynchburg Firehouse primary, Republican Firehouse primary. And they did. They threw it out and they gave some other remedies, which were essentially punishments. Now, the picture of two gentlemen with red circles around them, that is a picture of Trevor Webb. He was on the decision. He was adamantly opposed to keeping the firehouse. He wanted it thrown out. And he was on the appeals committee. His best man at his wedding was Wendell Walker's chief aide. The last picture, the furthest one to the right, shows the state central committee voting to throw out the firehouse. So, as I said, they threw out the firehouse and then there were some other punishments. But basically, the most disturbing thing about that was their attitude, because they were very cavalier, and it was convivial meeting, and their minds were already made up. It was clear they were going to throw it out. And what it really was not based on evidence. It was based on the fact that Lynchburg had acted autonomously. It was a big smackdown to Lynchburg. So let's look at the other remedies. So the results, the whole election was thrown out. The Lynchburg Republican unit, was defuncted, meaning it was disbanded and ordered basically not to exist any longer. And you can read the rest of them. Among the punishments is a commendation to the gentleman who ran, the Lynchburg citizen who ran the election. So he was commended for his efforts. Now, as I said, it wasn't just that they threw this out in such a cavalier manner, but it was basically a smackdown. So the Lynchburg unit, Wendell Walker wanted them to support Stephanie Reed, and it wasn't clear why. What is going on? But also, in the structure of the party, the Republican Party, the bureaucracy, basically controls the units. They see the units as their serfs. The unit is supposed to do what it's told, and that includes raising money for the party, voting for the people that they tell you to vote for, and door knocking and doing, putting up signs, what other efforts, are necessary. But you are supposed to do what you are told to do for the party. So these terms over here about a pretense of legality, that's what happened. It was all, a kind of simulacrum or a theatrical production of legality to throw out the election. But the fact was there was no evidence. So the Lynchburg Republican City Committee was accused, but they were found guilty. But where was the evidence? Well, they didn't need any, because to be accused is the evidence, apparently, in this. What are you guilty of? You're guilty of being accused. So now let's take a look at a similar scenario during the rise of the Communist Party of Chairman Mao in China. And I think there's a lot of corollaries. So let's take a look at that.
Comrade, this must be a mistake. I know this man. He's a good man.
Who are you?
I am a gardener.
Join us, comrade, or fuck off. 造反有理！
But what has he done?
He's been accused.
Accused of what?
Empress Lucky, within his element, Captain Righteous. Confess your crime.
Nothing to confess.
Crimes.
Nothing to confess.
Cut out.
造反有理，造反有理，一反到底。
Confess your crime.
Wait! You cannot do this to him!
Move. You want to beat him?
He is a good teacher!
So I think that's pretty powerful. You can see that the crime is being accused. And I apologize for the profanity, but I didn't cut it out because I think that's important too, to witness how disrespectful and beyond rude the Red Guard were. And that was Mao's youth group who basically murdered everyone and destroyed everything in Chinese culture. So, at any rate, I think that we've gotten some red flags, and I think it's time to wake up and look at that seriously. And remember, your awareness is your main defense. So, that and your right to vote, which you still have, just not in party-run primaries. Bye for now.